This story takes place 27 years after the First Corporate War. The Nest by Sean Carrière. Chapter 31. Back inside the bank, Kyle was still sleeping soundly. Had anyone looked through the visor of his helmet, they would have noticed his eyes darting around quickly behind tightly closed eyelids. Dreams can be pretty funny sometimes. In Kyle's dream, he was sitting at a table in a smoky bar. There was a small stage set up several meters ahead of his table, and standing on the stage was Sam, dressed in a baggy, comically oversized business suit with his hand grenade on a chain around his neck in place of a tie. Some fool had set up a mic stand, and the team's breacher was telling a story about one of his obscure and/or fictional relatives.
"Did I ever tell y'all about my Uncle Lenny, the gay midget?"
Sam asked.
"He came out of the cupboard."
He blurted into the microphone with a mug. The room was silent. Undeterred, the breacher moved on to his next bit.
"The other day, I was getting drunk with my Uncle George on his homemade beer when his wife, my Aunt Flora, came home from the doctor's office."
As Kyle kept watching Sam bomb on stage, a drink was being placed on the table in front of him. The young bounty hunter looked up to thank the server and noticed it was Bench Press. The strange thing wasn't that Bench Press was the waiter. The strange thing was that Bench Press was wearing a full radiation suit in urban camouflage. A moment earlier, the bar had felt comfortable and familiar, but now it felt alien. Before Kyle could ask himself why Bench Press was wearing a radiation suit, he looked back at the stage. Sam was still on stage and telling his story.
"My Aunt Flora was looking happier than she'd been in years. So my Uncle George asked her why she was in such a good mood. She tells him she just got her yearly checkup. And Aunt Flora's doctor told her she still had the tits of an 18-year-old girl."
That's when Kyle noticed that Sam wasn't wearing the baggy business suit from before. The breacher was now wearing a full radiation suit in urban camouflage, just like Bench Press was wearing. However, Sam's grenade was still hanging on a chain around his neck, outside the suit.
"My Uncle George then asks my Aunt Flora what the doctor had to say about her 65-year-old ass,"
Sam said clearly into the mic, despite his suit's visor helmet.
"So, my Aunt Flora glared at my Uncle George and said, 'Oh, your name didn't come up, dear.'"
Still, the room was as silent as the vacuum of space. Kyle looked down at the drink Bench Press had brought him, and noticed it was a Casey's brand meal in a can protein shake. When the young bounty hunter reached for his drink, he noticed his gloved hand and realized he too was wearing a full radiation suit. The young bounty hunter looked around and saw that there were only two other people in the small barroom. At the nearest table sat Laura. The wheelwoman was also wearing a full radiation suit in urban camouflage, but she was slouched in her chair, sleeping. Kyle then looked to the other end of the room, and saw their female prisoner standing behind the bar. The mystery girl was the only one not wearing a radiation suit. Instead, she was naked, just like when he'd first seen her. The girl stood silent as she stared past Kyle at something behind him. Kyle got up from his table and turned to look behind him. In the back wall were two large oak doors. Pretty big doors for such a small bar.
"Wait, what? Where the hell am I?"
he asked himself. That's when Kyle woke up. The young bounty hunter's eyes sprung open like cartoon pull curtains, and he quickly took in his surroundings. Kyle looked around the circle of wooden chairs. Next to him was an empty chair. Slouched in the next chair over was Laura, still wearing her radiation suit and obviously asleep, just like in the dream. In the next chair sat the girl prisoner, wearing her white radiation suit. By the girl's posture, Kyle could tell she was still awake and staring past him at the twin oak doors at the front of the bank. In the next chair over, sat Bench Press. The team's medic was still wearing his radiation suit and was awake, barely. In the final chair sat Sam. The team's breacher was wearing his full radiation suit as he blabbed on to bench press about some made-up relative or other.
Where's Slick?
Kyle asked himself.
He's supposed to be sleeping.
Kyle checked the clock in the lower right-hand corner of his helmet's head-up display, and realized he'd overslept by an hour. The young bounty hunter stood up from the wooden chair, his body stiff and sore.
Hey boss.
Bench press said. The first one to notice Kyle was awake. Sam turned around and was about to greet Kyle like bench press had, but the team's leader just raised a hand and cut him off.
Where's Slick?
Kyle barked, more annoyed than alarmed.
Don't get mad, boss.
Bench press began to say.
He just figured you needed the rest more than he did.
Kyle was furious with his team for not waking him, but he didn't say anything. The young bounty hunter just crouched and picked up his GAC submachine gun. He checked his weapon, then silently began walking toward the stairs. Sam and bench press shared a knowing look through the visors of their helmets, neither envying Slick for the chewing out he was bound to get for disobeying Kyle's orders. As Kyle moved his barely rested body up the stairs, he knew he was being watched. He could feel someone's eyes on his back. Over in the circle of wooden chairs in the middle of the room, Mouse had subtly diverted her stare from the twin oak doors to the head bounty hunter, making his way back up to the roof. The little bomb maker may have appeared blank and zombie-like, but she'd been keeping busy. The lady bounty hunter had failed to pat her down properly after tying her hands. So, over the last couple of hours Mouse had subtly retrieved the carbon fiber utility dagger she'd pocketed and sneakily cut the ropes from her wrists. Mouse's hands had been free for nearly an hour, but she'd kept them behind her back as she waited for just the right moment. The petite terrorist had already formulated her getaway plan. As soon as she'd see a rat, she would jump to her feet, run over to her improvised thermobaric bomb, pull the pin on the flashbang and run like hell for the vault before it went off. With any luck, Mouse might be able to seal herself in the vault before the inside of the bank became a massive conflagration. Even if she didn't seal herself inside the vault in time, burning alive was still better than getting eaten by those mutant rats. By that logic, the little bomb maker figured she'd be doing these dumbass bounty hunters a favor. As soon as the lead bounty hunter had disappeared from her field of view, Mouse went back to staring at the twin oak doors.